I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues Kate Perizzo and Mike Bonmasso. They work with me at the University of Guelph on this project. And I think it's also appropriate to acknowledge First Nations people. You know, if people who give thanks to the spirit of a deer after killing it, I would think are very unlikely to waste. Now, production is greater than food sales, and food sales are greater than consumption. In agriculture, I think our challenge is to balance, so we want to sustain sufficient production to equal adequate, healthy consumption. This is what I think we want to try to balance. So Plan A, in agriculture, we often talk about the fact that we're expecting 9 to 10 billion people by 2050. That's a 30 to 40% increase. But in developing countries, average incomes are rising, consuming more meat and richer foods, and this is leading to a food production increase of 70 to 100%, more than the 30 to 40. Much of this is driven by the expectation that meat consumption in Asia, particularly China, will continue to rise. However, the Chinese have come out with an edict that they want to drop from 63 kilograms of meat per person to 30. I think we want to keep that in mind. Now, Plan B would be we could have more and improved education for girls and women, and it's been well known since the Cairo conference back in 1990 that the more women are educated, the fewer children they have, and maybe we can come under the 9 billion target. We can reduce wasted food. It's now 40% in Canada. And there are opportunities to eat less meat, and much of the greenhouse gas emissions for meat are as a result of nitrogen fertilizer to grow the crops for meat. Nitrogen fertilizer is 1/3 of the ag energy budget. Nitrogen fertilizer requires a lot of energy to manufacture, and I think we have to keep this in mind. We could eat more pulses, beans, peas, lentils, and we could be eating insects, and somebody referred to cricket flour today. We could feed 1 billion extra people just with current technology. All we have to do is apply it. This isn't anything new. We could do it with just the current. And Martin Gooch came out with this report. It was 27 billion, now it's 31 billion. It's a lot of money. Now, at the University of Guelph, we've looked at, we've gone to the curbs and picked up food, and we've looked at what's avoidable and what's unavoidable. This is quite a tricky thing to do. An apple core that I leave left over is much different than the apple core that my daughter has. And my daughter and I have a synergistic relationship. When she's done eating her apple, she hands it to me, and then I bring the apple core down to what it should be. But in a lot of cases, we think that things are unavoidable when they're really not. Avoidable was 53%, and possibly avoidable was 11%. So we're generally in the range of about 1/3 unavoidable and 2/3 avoidable. I'm having trouble with this. What? Okay. So the principles addressing wasted food, reduction, 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 and that was mentioned today. And then secondly, I think we could look at feeding people with co-products rather than wasting this potential. I have an engineering colleague who's talking about purees. If we took food that was already plated and sent back to kitchens, if you put it at the right temperature and puree it, there may be opportunities to use that food. I think there are ways that we can look at this. Next, I would say feeding pets and livestock. The Netherlands are at the top of their game on this. They are taking all kinds of co-products that come from various industries, and they're streaming it where it can go into targeted rations for livestock. They're not just taking lemon rinds and feeding them to beef cattle. They're making sure that it's part of the diet and it fits in very precisely. And then next is anaerobic digestion. With AD, we can capture both energy and nutrients. And as an Aggie, I want to emphasize nutrients. They're very important. And to the extent that we can recapture nutrients, we can avoid the use of more nitrogen fertilizer, which requires a lot of energy and greenhouse gases. And then biodiesel, if we use that, we can recapture energy or compost nutrients. Diverting from landfill, of course, is at the bottom. It's not the first objective. Okay, and by reducing wasted food, we can reduce GHGs, energy, water, biodiversity, soil quality. We can improve soil quality if we're not trying to grow so much that's going to end up being wasted. We can save labor, money, and future capacity and respect. Now, consumers could change. Households in Canada spend $153 a week on food. If we assume that half of the 40% is wasted in the household, and that's pretty much what data in Canada show, then they're throwing out 31 bucks a week. It's like they're buying 5 bags of groceries. If you're buying 5 bags of groceries, you may as well leave one in the parking lot. Interestingly, organic shoppers spend $27 a week more than those who buy non-organic food. So I have a recommendation. Buy organic, and you can stop wasting. Buy organic, and you can still save $4. And by the way, I'd rather that you use that $27 to buy organic food when you stop wasting than to buy electronics. Or if you want to buy some other kind of high-quality food, buy food with those dollars. You're already spending it on food. Just stop wasting is my recommendation. Now, in our survey, we surveyed a lot of people that we had where we'd gone to the curb and picked up, so we knew exactly how much they were wasting. And then we surveyed. Most people feel guilty about wasting food, and if they feel more guilty, they waste less food. Now, I grew up as a Mennonite kid, and I thought I'd done my dash with guilt. But if more guilt saves food, I'm all for it. People with more food awareness waste less food, and most people say that wasted food is a social issue more than an economic or environmental issue. I've always thought it was an environmental issue, but the people that we surveyed think otherwise. The most common criterion to identify waste is appearance, followed by smell, and in this survey, best before dates were number 3. Just a comment about best before dates, I always tell people that ask me about it, if you keep bumping into best before dates, you're buying too much. Buy less. Those who use more criteria to determine what is no longer edible tend to waste more. If you're a simple guy like me and it has to smell bad before you throw it out, you don't waste much. If you have a whole lot of reasons that you can throw it out, you're going to waste more. Now, institutional food waste, 20% of edible food is wasted in restaurants. Plate waste is about 11%. This was determined by my colleagues Mike Bonmasso and his, I can't remember the other colleague working on this, but they had thought ahead of time that there was going to be a threshold of how much was on each plate, and the more you have on the plate, the more you waste. The thing that surprised them was that it had a lot to do with combination. If you have too many carbs on your plate, you're going to waste more than if you have carbs and salad. Combination had as much to do with it as the threshold. There was a 410 gram threshold, and over that, people tended to waste more. Bruce McAdams, that's who the other one was. Universities. I was at Mount Allison about 10 years ago, and they had decided to stop using trays because they wanted to save the energy that they were using to heat water to wash the trays. They were totally surprised when they found that wasted food dropped. This study's not from Mount A, it's from somewhere else, but the point is that if people just do not have trays, something as simple as that, if they carry to their table what they can carry in a plate and a cup, they realize that they're full when they've finished that, and then they don't waste as much. So I want to tie this in, and it might seem like a bit of a stretch to some of you. We have 350,000 plant species, 195,000 flowering plants with edible parts. Any guesses as to how many of these crops we actually use? Anyone want to guess? 10? Pretty close. We use about 300, but 17 species provide 90%. And the big three, you know what the big three are? Corn, rice, wheat. Corn, rice, wheat. Those are the big three. Most of our food comes down to those big three. More than half our food comes from just 3 species. It seems to me that we have to think about growing diverse crop species, spreading our risk as climate changes, accept seasonal food, and that could make things a lot more interesting. And with all of this, we can improve our health. This is my colleague, Yuban Zheng. He has a bitter melon that's been grown in organic high tunnels at the University of Guelph. And this, I think, to diversify our food in production makes a lot of sense to diversify risk. And I think it could help, too, at the other end where we're consuming it. And finally, I conclude by saying that I really think it's important to have an attitude of gratitude. If we have this, then a lot can be accomplished. Thank you.
Great, so let's move to some questions. So we'll take questions for about 15 minutes.
Sorry, I don't know if you have a translator.
Yeah.
If no, I'm going to try to make. Okay. Para el doctor Ralph, ¿cómo puede ser una buena combinación el poder elegir otro tipo de cultivos, basarnos más en la agrobiodiversidad, cuando mucha de la maquinaria que existe está hecho para un solo estilo de alimento bonito? Es decir, si yo encuentro una zanahoria que tiene una forma un poco más silvestre, me van a decir cuando yo lleve mi producto que no lo pueden procesar. ¿Cómo puede ser ese cambio? Gracias.
Well, that's a very good question. I think that it's important to rely less on machinery, but on the other hand, with precision agriculture, machinery is getting ever more sophisticated. So when I did my PhD, it was intercropping corn and soybean. And at the time, it was not possible to harvest corn and soybean for grain. But now, with laser sensors, those two crops could be separated, and technology can catch up. At the time, it was possible to plant them. I think biology trumps engineering, and I think we have to do what makes sense biologically. And the engineers are very smart people, and they can just figure out how to build the machines to help us do what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question right here. Okay. Yeah.
Dr. Goosh, I had a question for you. You ended your presentation with the statement about people, it's individuals who create waste and not businesses or industry, and I wonder if you can elaborate on that a little bit.
It's individuals working in businesses, it's individuals in senior management roles within different departments of different businesses. So we've done work with businesses where there's actual departments working against each other, and there's parts of the business that create waste in other parts of the business unknowingly, and because the different departments are incentivized in different way, it actually leads to this catch-22 effect. It's us in the household, we individuals, we buy, we say we're going to do one thing, we spout all this support for local food, or we say we're not going to buy this, or we're not going to do that. We get to the grocery store and we do exactly the opposite of what we said we would do, and then we have a whole bunch of excuses for why we didn't do it. Individuals on the farm everywhere, food waste, I don't know, I'd say that I'd be reticent to say anyone purposely goes out to waste food, though waste is an outcome of behavior.
Okay. Gustavo, and then over to Roberto.
Gracias. Quisiera preguntarle a cualquiera de ustedes, tomando en consideración las pérdidas y los desperdicios que hay, si no considerarían, y desconozco cuál es el caso de Canadá y de Estados Unidos, pero quisiera preguntarle si no considerarían que este tema tendría que ser un tema de seguridad nacional, considerando también la cantidad de gente que no tiene que comer y que está muriendo de hambre, ¿no? O sea, hay una contradicción enorme entre todo lo que se pierde, entre todo lo que se desperdicia, y por el otro lado la gente que no tiene nada que comer, y a veces los gobiernos, no digo que sea el caso, pero a veces los gobiernos no necesariamente están dándole la prioridad que tiene el tema. Alguien en la presentación anterior hablaba de que uno de los retos era que había una competencia en la prioridad de la importancia de los temas, no sé si a nivel de los gobiernos o de las empresas, pero ¿cómo pensar que algo como esto puede competir cuando debería ser un tema de la más alta prioridad desde mi punto de vista? Y por eso les pregunto si no debería ser un tema de seguridad nacional para nuestros países. Gracias.
I'll start. Yes, I agree that food security is also a question of national security. When people don't have enough to eat, when they don't have enough water to drink, people are going to get restless and they will rebel, and that will become a national security issue. I think Wynne Dyer has pointed out in his book Climate Wars that migration is going to happen because of climate change. Syria started with the climate change issue, and food security is a little slower than water, but food security is tightly linked to climate change. The other thing I would say is that as we get more and more industrialization and more robotics and so on, this is a threat to income. And there are some people who argue that we should have a guaranteed annual income. Trump argues that people in the United States are losing jobs because of cheaper labor. A lot of it has to do with automation. And I think that when people start losing jobs because of automation, then it's going to be, people will be more at risk. And I want to tie this back to food because I think that here in North America, at least in Canada, we don't have a shortage of food. We have a shortage of income. So hunger is not a food problem, it's an income problem. And I think we have to deal with that, and along with that, then people will have access to the food that's here, at least in North America.
And I just want to add, I think, so most of our work we have been focusing more on food donations and trying to address food insecurity across the U.S. And we have found that on the federal level there is a lot of interest and there is a lot of support behind this issue, and it's bipartisan support. And we've been working with a lot of senators and representatives across the aisle, and they all are really, really focused on working on this issue. So I think at least there's been a lot of movement that we've seen in the last 3 years on really focusing on this issue. It has not been framed as a national security issue, but at least kind of, and I think with framing, especially the new administration, framing is a huge thing if you want to get anything done. But we have found still a lot of support around this issue on the federal level in the U.S.
Okay, and we have time for one more question. Over to you, Roberto. Samuel, you want to ask one as well? Okay, if we go to Samuel as well.
Muchas gracias. Y breve. Quiero felicitar a Martin por su excelente presentación, pero también le quiero hacer un reclamo enérgico por no haber participado más durante las 3 días de taller. Me hubiera ahorrado a mí muchas de mis intervenciones. nos hubiera molestado menos. Con esto lo que quiero decir es que en el futuro yo esperaría un taller más balanceado, menos hacia banco de alimentos, menos hacia donaciones y más hacia esta lógica que Martin expresó muy claramente y en un inglés perfecto. Es precisamente ese paradigma el que nos permitirá trascender del problema estructural del donante y de la disponibilidad a una lógica del propio sistema. Pero como se dijo, y se dijo bien, el sistema también hay que modificarlo en términos de sus objetivos. El profesor mencionaba efectivamente, hay que equilibrar producción con un adecuado consumo. Y el consumo es el dinamizador finalmente de la cadena. Si seguimos teniendo excesos en el consumo, pero es muy importante esto, por el marketing excelente de las grandes empresas productoras de alimentos, que son las que inducen ese patrón de consumo, entonces vamos a tener un problema de sustentabilidad, de seguridad alimentaria y de seguridad nacional. Esas son las implicaciones. Así de que, Martin, felicidades, pero un reclamo auténtico de por no haber intervenido previamente. Me hubieras ahorrado muchos minutos de exposición. Gracias.
But we have enjoyed all your interventions, Roberto. Did you want to respond to that at all, Martin? If at least to say thank you?
Gracias. That's about the only Spanish I know, besides care. Thank you for the kind words. I'm just one person. There's many people in this room who also have great skills to bring. We came to the topic of food waste from purely financial, and we still do. We do not work from an environmental perspective. We don't work from a social perspective beyond finance and the fact we need to achieve sustainability. And too often there are people placing blame on the wrong areas because a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And a little knowledge exists amongst many people in many places. So all of us need to could do with improving our knowledge. What I didn't explain well was the seafood part and about lack of no economics being involved in the decisions on catch quotas and catch policies. The reason that's an issue is it leads to downstream issues, downstream losses that are ginormous, purely ginormous. And this is in Canada. This isn't to do with international fishing. It's so ginormous, the fact that the people that engaged us to do the project got us to change the wording.
I'm wondering how you translate ginormous. I have Samuel and then Etta.
Yeah, thank you. Basically, I work for government, so I'm not here to defend government, but I want to see a few things about the general conclusion that sometimes government doesn't consult can be false in many cases. In Canada, for instance, it's a requirement that for every policy you do, you consult. There's no ways about that. So government tries to consult wherever it can. Sometimes the challenge becomes listening to industry. Industry have their own agendas, different views, and sometimes after consultation, the government even get confused. Because there are different views around the country that it's very difficult to even bring them together. So instead of just blaming government, I think we need to think about a system, the whole system. Government, industry, everybody in the system to work together to make sure that we can get this done. Normally, government always promotes public-private partnership. And therefore, something that we always want to bring up. So the idea that government doesn't consult is always not completely true. Okay.
Thank you, Samuel. And Etta, you have the final word.
more food for thought. First for Christina, Harvard. Hello. Last year I was lucky enough to participate in the EAT Forum that the Scandinavian countries organize each year. I invite you all to see what they are doing. And there was an award presented for global innovation, and this award was given to Innocentia AB that has a digital sensing label that can tell and monitor the actual status of food that is packed. That is labeling at the 2.0 version of food labeling. I think we in the region need to know about these innovations that are taking place in other parts of the world, and that works for would work for us too. For Dr. Martin, I love what you say about diversifying crops, because this mimics biodiversity, and we are going back to where we begin in agriculture. That's why Mexico is so keen on the conservation of traditional agroecosystems that are the cradle of agriculture, the cradle of crops diversity, and we know what we are doing in terms of, well, not we, they know what they are doing. And we, the 3 countries of North America, have left behind the huge importance of traditional knowledge in this. We have to return to what we know, what have been known for so many years. Thank you very much. And also, traditional knowledge brings us back to attitude of gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much to the committee as well. Thank you, Dan.